Hello there, my wolflings. I think it is high time that we talk about hexing. Hexing spells. The spells that are naughty, the spells that for the longest time, there was this understanding, or at least in many spaces, there was this understanding that these are the spells that you never, ever, ever do. Because then you conjure up images like practical magic, like the craft. Luckily, I think today there is a more nuanced approach. I want to be very clear and say that at the top of this, if you are a witch and you never, ever hex, you never have hexed, you never will hex, you don't want to hex, that does not make your witchcraft invalid, okay? The same can be said, though, for witches who do hex. For the witches like me who do not think that hexing is unethical, immoral, bad to do, naughty, I don't really have that opinion of hexing. And neither is valid or invalid, okay? These are very personal choices. It is our responsibility to bring into our practice spells that we are not only learned on, we're knowledgeable on, that also we're comfortable doing. Yes, we want to be willing to kind of challenge ourselves. We want to try some new things. But if your intuition is just telling you from the deepest pit within you, I don't want to do this, baby, listen to that. My goal is to provide some insight into why I do not think that these spells are immoral. I think that these are spells that actually we should be doing more of. It's also okay to consider and to follow up. It's okay to, really sit with it for a while before you do a spell. In fact, it's probably better if you have this feeling of interest, but you're not quite sure, sit with it. Read about it, learn about it. That is the best thing about knowledge in this practice. There is no amount of knowledge really at all, not even just in witchcraft, but just at all, that is ever wasted, because we have the knowledge and then we decide what to do with it. So like I said, these are spells that are very personal choices to make. They are also very sensitive choices to make, as we will get into. And like I said, at the top, my goal is just to provide some insight and then let you make the decision of what you feel is best for you. If you would like to let us know in the comments, I would love to hear how this is either in or not in your practice and why. Of course, all comments need to be respectful and kind and civil. Hexing and healing spells are two sides of the same coin. Or to use this analogy, and I understand it is a little forced. I get it. Just work with me. Roll with me on this, okay? I see hexing and healing as two end zones on a football field. American football. So on the one side, we have our healing spells. These are our nurturing spells, our tending spells. These are the spells that soothe and soften. They're a balm on our soul. And that's wonderful. And that's lovely. And if we lived in a perfect world, we would never, ever, ever need the hexing spells, because when something came up, as something is bound to do, we would just use our healing spells to soothe and soften. Unfortunately, we do not live in a perfect world. So with the analogy of the football field, and we have our healing spells, and then we have our hexing spells, it's all trying to lead to some outcome, right? That's a positive outcome. We're trying to get a win. We're trying to get success. We're trying to get victory. We want those little chalk marks, those little tallies, those goals to just keep going up until we win at this game or in this situation. Again, I know it's forced. I'm getting it. Again, keep rolling with me. And again, if we lived in a perfect world, we would never need this other end zone, because we would just always go towards this direction and take the ball and run this play and do this spell and engage in this ritual to get those soothing, softening, nourishing spells and to get that type of outcome. I want to kind of pull back and mention the key differences between a jinx, a hex, and a curse. So in my personal opinion, a jinx is a bad spell, like a naughty spell, but it's more of an irritating outcome. It's not going to be huge or lifelong struggles or hardship. It's not going to bring a ton of pain, a ton of discomfort, a ton of negativity to someone's life. It's more of an irritation, something that just we can't quite turn the knob all the way, and we come full circle and it's resolved. So a jinx might be that someone always misplaces their left sock and they're constantly without a matching pair. Again, you can see it how that is not really going to, in the long term or in the big picture, affect someone's life in a huge way. It's incredibly irritating, but it's not as dire. It's not as much of a huge problem to overcome. You just deal with mismatched socks. Now, a curse, on the other end, is the entire opposite of a jinx. A curse is lifelong, could be multi-generational, and a curse is usually like the worst of the worst, that someone can never have this type of outcome that they're looking for. They will never be happy. That this curse, like a plague, will follow them their whole life. They will always have to deal with it. And maybe even their children or their family, their friends have to deal with it as well. Those are kind of the two main differences. I see a hex as in the middle of those two. So it's definitely not as nonchalant, shall we say, as a jinx. It's definitely more intense than a jinx, but it's not as long-term or threatening or like a shadow or a plague following someone their entire life. We could turn it into that, and then it kind of becomes more of a hex / a curse. But in general, a hex is something that's a little bit more of immediate and maybe a little bit more finite in the outcome that we're seeking. So the reason that I do not see hexing as, again, unethical or immoral or bad or don't do this, even though it is a spell that is meant to bring about negativity, hardship, pain, or harm to someone, to me, it goes to the reason why. Why are we doing these types of spells? Again, if we lived in a perfect world, we would never, ever, ever need to do spells like this. Right now, we have a president of the United States who just is doing things that break the law. He's actively targeting communities of color, the gay and trans community, Mother Earth herself. The amount of harm that this man and this administration have done is forever. We may be able to fix certain things, but the damage is done. This president and this administration are more invested in protecting themselves, their bottom line, and their billionaire friends than they are the general public. That is why I do not find these spells to be immoral, because to me, when we have people in power, or even taking it out of politics, when there is someone who is doing something and we cannot appeal to their higher angels, we cannot talk to them because they will not listen, we cannot reason with them because they are irrational, what are we supposed to do? So this is where it becomes very, very sensitive. And when, why, how, or if we ever choose to do a hex. Because that sensitivity that comes in often for people who choose to do these spells is because something is happening that is brushing up deeply against our values, our core values. So I'm going to give you an example. Okay. One of my core values is Mother Earth. I am a nature witch. I personally willingly moved to a house with no furnace in the Colorado mountains because I wanted to be closer to nature with my partner. Nature is an immediate bridge into my magic. It's an immediate bridge home to my inner child. It's where I feel safe to do my shadow work. It is one of the most precious things I hold dear. I do not see Mother Earth as mere resources. To me, she is a living, breathing being. She is the mother of all things. She is the altar of all things. She is the magic. And when I see environmental disasters, ecocides, war, famine, the atrocities that we just commit all the time and have been for so long, it breaks my heart. It really is like a knife wound in my heart space. So let's say I have an opportunity to sit down with the CEO of Exxon. So I want to bring all this stuff to this conversation with the CEO of Exxon. So I bring stories and anecdotes of when I was a child and I would sit outside. I would have my stuffed animal and my juice box and my blanket and my book because I was a weirdo and I didn't have a ton of friends growing up. That was safe to me. Sometimes I would put my Beanie Babies in all the trees in my backyard and I would have these grand adventures and they were beautiful. And to this day, I cherish those memories with so much love for that inner child that still exists inside of me. So I bring the stories and I bring the anecdotes. But then I also bring just what I value about Mother Nature, that I get to see deer just walking around outside of my house. There's birds, there's bears. She's what produces our food. She is what allows us to go and play outside and not be on our digital cameras, laptops, iPads, whatever you have, you know. We get to go be outside and we get to be moving and experiencing. I could also bring all the studies that show at how we are actually in a nature deficit with our connection to nature. I could bring the studies that show that children who aren't on digital appliances but are outside in nature tend to do better in social situations. They tend to just do better overall as children as they grow into adults. I could talk about how healing Mother Earth is for people who have cancer when we do things like forest bathe, for people in the gay community who have found acceptance in nature when they unfortunately didn't have that in their own family. I could bring all of that information to the CEO of Exxon. I could appeal to his higher angels. I could beg and I could plead. Please, sir, I see that you're a human being. Please find it in your heart to slash your bottom line and to take more money out of your bank account, to remove a few of those zeros, to do the right and good thing by Mother Earth. Do you think he's gonna do that? Hell no. Hell no. That is who we are dealing with. These people do not care. They don't care. We cannot appeal to someone's higher angels when they don't have them. If we want to do the nourishing, the tending, the softening spells, we have to first make sure that the situation that we are doing this spell in or for will be received. And it won't be here. All you have to look at is what happened with the Exxon Valdez oil spill to know that these people do not care. They did not care about how disastrous that oil spill was to the environment, to the fact that otters were clawing their eyeballs out from the burning of the oil. Those people said, fuck the otters. That's who we're dealing with. They did not care about the fishermen, the communities, the First Nation indigenous tribes that live there. They didn't care about anyone. They cared about their shareholders and, again, their bottom line. So what good is a nourishing, tending, healing spell going to do when we are dealing with people like that? To put it in another sense, we could put every single person from every community that this president has targeted, trans people, disabled people, women, immigrants, people from the gay community, from the First Nations tribes that are here. We could have him sit down with all of those people and have them share their stories about what they value about America, how they are true patriots, about what they do to actively make this country great. He does not care. He doesn't give a fuck. One, because these people have no value to him as in what they can give to him. They have nothing to offer. And if you are Trump, that is all you care about, is what can you do for me? That's all they care about. That is all he cares about. It is baked into the cake, his hatred. Just like a cake that is baked, you can't go and pull the eggs out or the milk out. You can't pull the hatred out of him. You cannot. He is our oldest president. He's probably not long for this world. He is going to go to his grave being a hateful, bigoted asshole. So when we have examples like that, or even in our own personal lives, doesn't have to be huge and collective and, multi-layered and nuanced and all-encompassing. We may have people in our own lives that treat us like shit, that keep us down, that hurt us, that do not care what they are doing to affect us. They don't care. It's unfortunate, it's sad, it's tragic, but we have to accept that some of these people have no concern for anyone other than themselves. So again, if that is the situation we are dealing with someone, how do we go about remedying that? Because again, all spells, whether we're on this side of the end zone or we're on this side, the goal is success. The goal is a victorious spell, a positive outcome, or at least the outcome that we're seeking. Whether the outcome is positive or not, if we see the outcome being manifested, that would be considered positive. I think you're picking up what I'm putting down. So what do we do in situations like that when we're trying to balance these wrongs? We're trying to staunch this metaphorical bleeding, and we have someone who just keeps ripping off the bandage and laughing at us while we're bleeding. That is why I do not think that hexing is immoral or unethical. Because sometimes when we cannot get that justice, balance those energies, those outcomes, in the real world, sometimes we have to turn to our magic. So the reason that we hex is often because there is a situation where someone is doing something that is completely antithetical to what we value. I would definitely advocate that we don't do any hexes for people that have done something like a minor grievance, a petty slight. Now, I say that with full recognition that as someone with multiple layers of privilege, what seems like a petty grievance to me may in fact be huge to someone else, which is where, again, we need to make our own personal choices as to why we would do these types of spells, or again, why we wouldn't do these types of spells. I also find that with some of the other stuff, some of the more slighter, pettier, or not as consequential, maybe not just a sharp edge, a shank right into the edge of what we value, there is this understanding that sometimes karma just needs to take its toll. Karma just needs to work through its process in due time, and these people will get the outcome in the same fashion, again, just not on my personal timeline. So for example, if I was going to hex someone because they cut me off in traffic and they were driving like an idiot, well, is that worth me hexing them? Maybe it is because they're being an absolute jerk. Or maybe I just need to let this person be a jerk, and one day something's going to happen and they're going to have to face the consequences on that day, and maybe I just need to let that happen. Those are questions that, again, we need to consider. But when we value things, true things, again, maybe not some minor petty slights, but when we value things like marginalized communities, Mother Earth, justice, truth, freedom, accountability. When we value these things and we see that not only are the people in power doing everything they can to shit on all of that, but they're covering up for their corrupt friends, their billionaire friends, there's no one holding anyone to account. that is where a hexing spell can come in and say, well, we're going to get into this one way or another. Yeah, we're going to use our vote and we're going to go protest and we're going to petition and we're going to do all that. And in the meantime, we're going to also be doing this over here to energetically balance these back out because they need to be balanced. If we look at the end zone analogy again, where on one end of the end zone, or at one end zone, we have hexing, and then on the other one, we have healing, we might start to recognize that the reason that we're hexing is that so we can eventually heal. But we can't do anything if we can't staunch the bleeding. We cannot stand up for the communities that we care about, for Mother Earth, for truth, for justice, for freedom, for what is right and good in this world. We cannot do that if we just sit there while people in power are doing horrible and despicable things. This is why they are two sides of the same coin, or why they are each one end zone at a football stadium, and sometimes we need to go this way, and sometimes we need to go that way. Hexing, because it is often based on what we deeply value, is a reminder that at the core of all we value is love. Our love for our neighbor, our love for Mother Earth, our love for freedom, our love for the future. All of these things are rooted in hexes, and it is coming out in a way that is, again, uncomfortable. If we didn't have to hex, I don't think anyone really ever would be hexing, but we don't live in that world, and we have to address what's going on with our own personal lives or collectively politically. This is why I also think that we can't have a witchcraft practice that isn't inherently political, but that is a different video for a different day. What I will say here before we move on to the next reason that I don't think that hexing is immoral is because of what we value and what we love. Hexing brings us front and center into our magic and front and center into our own personal life, into our human life, and into our spiritual witchcraft practice. They literally merge into one. When we're doing the softer healing spells, it's a little bit easier to kind of pull back and just say, okay, let's just kind of wait. Let's just let things play out because we're soothing, we're softening. With a hexing spell, we are standing 10 toes into protection, into defense of what we love and who we love. It is, again, bringing our physical selves and our spiritual practices into this commingled cooperation, and they are both at the helm. The next reason why that I think that hexing is not immoral or bad to do is because hexing is a line. It is a boundary drawn in the sand that says, if you cross this line, we're going to have problems. Hexing is the fuck around and find out spell. Again, if everyone just lived their lives and minded their business, we would never need to hex anyone. If everyone just treated each other with basic respect, took accountability when they did something wrong, we would never need to hex. There would be no reason. Again, people are not like that. And so when we are dealing with people who think that they can fuck around and just never find out, that is a hard pass from me. Kellyanne Maddox, who is indomitable, she is such a force in this community, thank goddess so, has a video on hexing. I recommend you go watch it, but I loved what she said about hexing. She said that hexing spells are like a bitch slap. Like a, nope, here's your sign. She called it a rude awakening, and I love this phrase because, again, it is not me who's just doing this willy-nilly. If someone is doing something and they are now in the find out of their fuck around, babe, that is their problem. That is their situation to deal with. That is not my responsibility. That is not my fault. That is not my cross to bear. That is on them. She also, in her video, which again, love, please go watch it, says that oftentimes people will exist in this delusion where, again, they think that they can just fuck around and never find out, that they can just do whatever they do and there's no recourse. There's no effect to the cause that they are putting out in this world. And a hex stops that right in its tracks. It stops that pattern. It stops that behavior and says, no, like the bitch slap. It says, hell no. You do this, you cross this line, you are going to find out. You are going to learn today that you cannot exist in your delusional little bubble and think that you can just do whatever you want and there is no recourse to your own actions. And this is where, before we do a hex, we want to be very clear what type of outcome we want to see happen. If it is just a very minor, petty grievance and we want something horrific to happen to them for generations, as much as we try to put into the spell, it may not work out that way because that doesn't balance the scales out again here. We want to kind of bring things back into that level of balance. At least right these wrongs in the ways that they need to be righted. That doesn't mean that someone is ever going to see the error of their ways. Again, talk to someone like Trump, it's never going to happen. It's never. He's been a racist and a sexist. He's been a hateful bigot his whole life. He is not going to wake up tomorrow if someone does a hex on him and see the error of his ways. What we can do is stop his actions, stop what he is doing, so that that harm isn't perpetuated, again, based on our values, to those whom we love or to the places that we love, like in nature. With hexes, we want to make sure that we're very clear as to the outcome. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't ever have fun or experiment or play in our witchcraft. We absolutely should. But with a hex, I think, at least for me, it feels the most secure and grounding when those spells that I'm doing, the screws are really tight. You know what I mean? Like, I'm stepping into this spell. I'm aware I'm doing it on this day, at this time, with this particular moon phase, for this reason. This is the outcome. These are the tools. I'm doing it alone. I'm doing it with my group. I'm bringing in all this stuff. We want to be very clear with that when we're doing hexes. Again, at least for me, that has felt the most supportive in my practice. Because when I have all that stuff completely ironed out, it allows me to step into the channeling and the energetic direction that I'm sending this so much more. With a healing spell, we might have a little bit more room to be a little lackadaisical, to maybe be a little more playful, to be slower, kinder, quieter. We have a little bit more room, let's say, with those spells because we're working to soften and soothe. Whereas with the hex spell, we are sending something out with a very clear direction towards a very specific person or a group of people. And we might want to be even looking at, are we focusing on a type of, at a part of the body? Are we affecting a portion of their life? You know what I mean? Are we affecting, not the whole person, but maybe their money, maybe their health, maybe their friendships? Are we targeting the whole person, the whole entity, or are we looking at very individual, specific sections that we want to target with this spell, and why? And that is why with a hex, I definitely recommend, first, like I said at the beginning, really doing your research. Learning and accruing more knowledge as you go can never be wrong, because you can either take the knowledge and apply it, or you can say, that might be true, but it's not true for my personal practice, so I'm just going to leave that here. Again, to each their own. Very personal, very sensitive decisions to be made. I definitely recommend If you know you want to do a spell, really planning, building things up, gathering your tools, figuring out the day, the time, the lunar phase, all of that. I definitely recommend taking some time to do that. So it might take you a whole lunar cycle just to do one spell. I am here to say, though, I think it's better to do one spell that you feel so in sync with, that you just feel so in your power, and you send it and you direct it and you feel so good after it. I think that's better than trying to do 10 little spells and then bring a bigger spell into the practice. One of the last reasons why I do not think that hexing is immoral or bad in any way is because hexing is literally reclaiming our right to our rage. Hexing is a rage spell, essentially. It's rooted in our values and in what we love. And that's why we are raging and showing our teeth so ferociously. We're defending and protecting something, whether that's us, a part of our life, a community we care about, Mother Earth, whatever it is. Hexing is a reclamation of our right to rage. And of course, women back in the day probably had to do some hexes because they physically could not go out and vote. They couldn't use their voice. They couldn't stand up to their husbands. They couldn't take their power back in those ways. But some women maybe didn't even have access to the tools of hexing, or didn't have access to the space, the time, and the privacy in order to do spells like this, because they were just not given that sovereignty, even though, of course, they were sovereign people. Hexing is a reminder that we are sovereign and that we are also interconnected. I love what Drew Afwalo said, famous TikToker, and I'm not trying to just name drop all over the place here, but when absolute badass powerhouse women say things that I agree with, I feel it is incumbent on me to make sure that people know that that was from them and that inspired me. But Drew Afwalo, infamous TikToker, amazing woman, was doing an interview on our podcast. And she was talking about how she's built this platform. I mean, if you're on TikTok, you probably know Drew. But she was talking about how she's built this platform up, exposing and highlighting the harms of patriarchy. And she makes a lot of fun at it. And she, makes fun of these dirtbag dudes. And it's amazing. Love this for her. But what she said was that these men will come into her comments, or they'll DM her or whatever, saying the most vile things ever. Not merely just attacking her weight. She's also a woman of color. So, men just go after all of that all the time and attack it. But more than that, these men will comment the most disgusting things to her. And so she responds. And instead of siding with her, instead of recognizing why she has to stand up and say these things to these awful men who said these awful things, people have turned to her or have commented and said, why can't you just respond with grace and compassion and forgiveness? And Drew's like, so you want me to respond gracefully when a man says he wants to maybe do something with my body that I do not consent to? She said, and this is what I love, she said that is emotional entitlement. Emotional entitlement. That people, usually people of power, or men to women, whatever, but usually people will say things like that because, back to that delusion that Kellyanne Maddox mentioned, there's this bubble where they just want to send all their bullshit out, and it crosses the threshold of their little bubble into the externals of their life. They do something stupid. They make a horrible, disgusting comment on some woman's TikTok. But the woman has to respond with grace, compassion, and kindness, because people are entitled to her emotional response. And because they feel entitled, they believe that she should respond this way. Otherwise, she's inconvenient, she's raging, she's now bothering us, she's irritating, whatever fucking dumbass shit they could say. It's emotional entitlement. And that is exactly why I think we have a right to hex. Because we are sovereign people. And it doesn't just have to be women hexing the patriarchy, although, I mean, please do that all day, every day. But we have a right to our rage. And baby, there are so many things to rage about right now. Unfortunately, there are. And my hexing is not only me hexing because I value these communities, I value Mother Earth, I value my own fucking future. It's not just that. And it's not just because these people need a bitch slap, I would argue a little more. It's also because they want to do all of this, but especially for women or marginalized communities, we need to be silent, obedient, enabling, and conforming. That's what they want from us. They want us to never push back. They want us to never make waves or point anything out. They want us to be as silent as the fucking furniture while they commit and do these horrible things and inflict this type of harm. That is what they want. And hexing is a fuck you to them. Hexing says, I may not have the power to go up against a whole political administration by myself, but I'm going to use this spell to take one little chink out, and if I do this and other witches do this, then we will just start taking this shit out chink by chink in this chain until that chain breaks and it can't hold or bear the load anymore of this corrupt administration. Us hexing is a reminder that not only do we have a right to rage and that we are sovereign, it also reminds us, again, of what we love in this world. It reminds us of our power. It reminds us of activities and actions and processes that were denied to other women, denied to other people, because they could not ever get even a sliver of something for themselves. So that is why I think hexing, at least in my own personal practice, holds a very sacred spot. It really does. Because for me, whenever I engage with a hex, whether it's for my own personal life or collectively, I should also say that I haven't ever, I have hexed people in my personal life, but not to the same extent, because for me, I have a lot of privilege. I can get by. I will be okay. But when I look at communities that I care about, when I look at Mother Earth, that's where my rage just really starts to take over, But hexing holds such a sacred spot in my practice, because to have the honor to hex now, that might sound weird to say, but actually I really believe in that. It's an honor when I hex something, because again, I am standing 10 toes in on my truth, on my faith, on what I believe, on my power, on my rage, and using that, directing that, and channeling that towards the outcome that I seek. That is an honor. That's an honor to do. When we engage with hexing, one of the things that, again, I think is the most helpful is to choose one. Start with one and start maybe kind of small with your hex, because you want to feel as grounded and as supported as possible. That is going to help the outcome be made manifest in your mind before it's ever happened. But I will also say, I think it's best to start small so then you can document. Documenting your spells, the outcomes, the situations is going to be really important because the more little things you pick up, the more you see that this hex was successful. This hex was maybe not successful. And then you can start to tweak. I also recommend really doing some protective stuff for yourself to make sure that you're just really rooted, grounded into your power, but you're also very protective in it as well. I also feel that one of the best things to do after a hex is to, after you've closed your circle or you've closed your practice, whatever your practice looks like, I recommend sitting and letting it be for maybe 24 hours. So like for me, I do my hexes in my office. I do all my spells really in my office if I'm not doing them outside. And I may not come into my room for 24 hours if I don't have to. If I have to, some things I might do, I might go play stupid games on my phone after I've done the spell. I might go just sit outside. I might just watch the fire, again, depending on the time of year. But just doing things that are very not witchy to bring you back to earth and anchor you into your physical self. Also, just making sure that you're sleeping, that you're drinking enough water, and that, maybe you're really taking time to nourish yourself with some good food. These are all things that can be very helpful for your practice because we're sending all of this out and now we want to replenish. So we can replenish by watching a funny movie, by playing something on our phone, by drinking water, by going to bed, by taking a walk outside. Those are things that really help to anchor us back into our physical selves so that our spell has time to do the work. So those are all the reasons that I think hexes are not bad spells to do. Again, not necessarily saying we should go out and hex everyone all the time for everything. We would be hexing until our days are done. We would never not be hexing, and that's just not reasonable. But again, it is actually an honor for me when I step into a hex because it is a reclamation of all those who have come before me and the shoulders that I'm standing on, the shoulders that I'm standing on and why I'm doing the spell, the purpose behind it, the rage behind it, all those things. So again, please let me know in the comments if you hex, if you don't hex, and why your decision is that way. Please be respectful and civil. And I'd love to hear all of your suggestions, what's worked, what hasn't, anything you want to say. Thank you for watching and happy hexing to you.